Welcome to this course on Eclipse. I am Rangarao Karnam and I have more than a decade's experience in developing, designing and architecting web applications with Java. I have been using Eclipse for almost 15 years now. Eclipse is one of the most popular Java open source IDEs. If you are a Java developer using the Eclipse IDE, then you would be spending more than 60 to 70% of your time on Eclipse. If you improve your skills on Eclipse, you can be much more productive, leaving you time to do a lot of other things you love. We would start with basics and then we would move into more Eclipse features like views, perspectives, how do you search, navigate, and then we would look at a lot of features which would make you productive with Eclipse. Keyboard shortcuts, how do you automatically generate code? How do you use things like code templates? How do you format code automatically? And what are save actions? We would also look at things like managing Maven projects with Eclipse, also Git project, a few Eclipse plugins. We had a lot of fun creating this course and we hope you would too. Thanks for your interest in this course. If you are ready to learn more, then go ahead and sign up for this course. Or you can take a test drive by using our free preview feature. See you in the course. In this chapter, let's get a quick overview of the entire course. All source code for our particular course is in the repository Eclipse in 28 minutes. You'd find a lot of details in here about the code generation, the refactoring, keyboard shortcuts and everything that you can use as a quick reference once you complete the course. Also present in here is a small installation guide. So installing Eclipse is really a cakewalk. I mean, you don't really need a lot of help installing Eclipse as such. If you have any problems, then you can probably go here and use this installation guide. Once you click the raw button in here, you can download the installation guide and you would be able to install the entire set of tools that we would need to be able to launch up and work with Eclipse. We would start with the basics of Eclipse. We would start with creating a workspace. We would start with creating a new project. You would try and edit a Java file and also create a new unit test. After that, we would get into debugging Java code. We would understand what are breakpoints, what are conditional breakpoints, and things like that. We would then move in important Eclipse features like views, perspectives, and a couple of useful things to know how to navigate and how to search. And then we would move into the features which would really improve your productivity with Eclipse. We would learn what are the different keyboard shortcuts that are present, what are the important ones. We would try and demo a few of them for you. And then we would look at code generation and code templates. These features help you in generating code much faster. And at the end, we would kind of look at how you can automatically format code and also automatically do a few things whenever you save something. We would then learn how to play around with Maven projects with Eclipse. How do you build projects? How do you run them on Tomcat and things like that? And then we would learn how to import a project from Git repository or the Git repository. We would also discuss about a lot of Eclipse plugins. We would end this course discussing about miscellaneous topics which kind of did not fit in any of the categories that we discussed before. Are you ready to get on this journey with Eclipse? What are we waiting for? Let's have some fun with Eclipse now. If you already have some experience with Eclipse, then you can safely skip this section and you can go on to the video on editing a Java file. If you are a beginner, then you are in the right place. Let's go ahead and launch up Eclipse, create our first workspace and create our first Java file and run it during this step. I would launch up Eclipse. I'm using Mac, so I'm typing in Eclipse in here, or you can do a Ctrl Escape in Windows and type in eclipse.exe and you should see an icon like this come in. Otherwise, you can go to your Eclipse folder and double click on the eclipse.exe to launch it up. So let's launch up Eclipse. When you launch up Eclipse, Eclipse asks for something called a workspace. Workspace is nothing but a folder where Eclipse stores all its configuration. With Eclipse, there are a lot of things that you can configure for a project. How do you want to format source code? What are the save actions you would need? What are your preferences? All these kinds of preferences are stored in a particular folder. Your source code also might be stored in the same folder as the workspace. You have to give in some folder from your local hard disk. I've chosen Eclipse in 28 minutes as the folder name. I can now go ahead and click OK. Couple of platform related tips before we move further. If you're using Mac, whenever I say control, use command. Use the command button instead of the control button whenever I say control. That's number one. Number two is Eclipse has this thing called preferences. So Eclipse preferences. This is how you access it in Mac. But if you're using Windows, then you need to say Windows preferences. So if you look at somewhere down here, you'd see something called Windows, and then you click that, and then you can bring up preferences. That's one change. So if you're using Windows, whenever I say Eclipse preferences, you have to go to Windows and bring up preferences. There's a small difference in how Eclipse lays out things in Mac and Windows. So those are the two things you need to remember. Whenever I say control in Mac, go ahead and type in command. And whenever I say Eclipse preferences, you're actually going to Windows preferences in Windows. Those two aside, you'd see that once we clicked OK, Eclipse brings up this window, which is called the Eclipse launch page. The thing which we are using in here is the Java EE IDE for web developers. So there is a simple Java IDE as well. So there's an Eclipse Java IDE and a Java EE IDE. Java EE IDE comes in with a lot of plugins which would help us to develop web applications easy, whereas the Java IDE would just have the plugins which would be interesting for Java. If you're interested in trying out a few of the tutorials, you can go ahead and click the tutorials, or you can check out the samples in here as well. What I would do is I would close the welcome screen and I would want to set up a project. Before setting up the project, what I want to also do is I really like seeing things very big. So I want to increase the font size. So I click Eclipse preferences. If you are in Windows, it's Windows preferences. And I'm typing in font. What I'm doing is I'm typing in font and I would want to increase the basic text font. So I would choose this option, text font, and I would want to increase this. So I'll say edit. For all my videos, I really like to have bigger font so that you can clearly see what's happening. So what I do is increase the font size. So now we have it set at 28, and that would be really clear and easy to see. Now let's get started with creating our first Eclipse project. The way you create projects with Eclipse is File, New, or the keyboard shortcut is Ctrl N. Just press Ctrl N and this interface comes in, or File, New, and then you can type in the kind of thing that you would want. Actually, you can expand and choose different things. That's a slow way. So let's say if I want to create a Maven project, I'll type in Maven and then it comes up. So you don't need to really click and then go and choose. All that you need to do is when the wizard comes up, type in what you want. So I want to create a Java project. So I'll type in Java project and then that becomes the first option. I select that and I press enter to choose the next. That's it. Now I can give a project name to this. I'll call this Eclipse in 28 minutes and you can choose which JRE you would want to use. I mean JRE Java version which you want to use. I'll use Java 8. That's not a problem at all. And I would click finish. It's asking me whether to use something called a Java perspective. We would discuss perspectives in one of these sections which is dedicated for perspectives. Do not worry about them. I'll click yes. So let's use Java perspective and let's go ahead. Eclipse comes up with this default layout. If you look at this particular layout, there is a list of tasks that you can have. I mean, that's not really important. I'll close that out. There is an outline which is shown in here. We'll discuss about outline and you'd see another set of views in here. And on the left hand side is something called a package explorer. Package explorer is where you can see the source files that you have. What I'll do now is I'll go ahead and create our first Java class. So right click, new, or you can say Ctrl N. Now what do I want to create? Java class. So I'll type in class. So class, click next, enter. So I would want to create my first Java class. So I'll call this first Java. You can also put in a package if you would want to. So com in 28 minutes, Eclipse. And I would want a public static void main as well. So I'll do that and click finish. That is all that is involved in creating a Java file with Eclipse. And now you have the complete Java file ready. So now you can go ahead and run this program. Now how do I do that? Right click, run as Java application. The console does not come up because we have nothing to show on this thing. So what I'll do is I'll type in system dot, you'd see that Eclipse is bringing this drop down which shows all the things that you can use from system. So system.out.println, and I would want to print hello world. And now I can say right click run as Java application, or Alt Shift X T hello world. That's perfect. So now you'd see that this is the view which is called console, where the output of the program is printing. In this step, we have launched up Eclipse, created a workspace, created our first Java class, and learned how you can run it. What I would recommend you to do is try and play around with creating more Java classes. Because you are a beginner, I really recommend you play around and try and figure out what's happening in here. From the next section onwards, we would start editing Java files using a lot of shortcuts, and we would start using a lot of advanced features. Why do we use Eclipse? The main reason is we want to edit Java code, right? So that's the reason why we use Eclipse. And in this particular step, we would learn a lot of things about editing Java code. The first thing is, the first shortcut is Ctrl M. Ctrl M maximizes and minimizes. So you are seeing now the window getting maximized and getting minimized. So that's possible through Ctrl M or Command M. So you can maximize and minimize. Now let's remove this line and try to type it in again. So I want to use system. So system, I pressed, so I want to bring up system class. So one of the things I can do is just type in sys and press Ctrl Space bar. Ctrl Space bar would bring up the options. It's suggesting these are the probable classes which you might be thinking about. So I would choose one of them by pressing enter. So I'd choose the first one. So system, and then type in dot, it brings up the list of options. Eclipse suggests what are the different things that you can use. So system dot, what you are seeing in here at the start is what are the variables which you can use as well as the methods you can use. I want to do a out. So I type in out dot print and press enter. Eclipse is suggesting to use one of the overridden functions of print. It's suggesting to use boolean, but you can type in anything. So that's the basic way you can bring up different methods and different fields which are present in a class. You can just type in dot and then it would bring it up directly. The thing which we are using in here is a control space. Control and space together. So any place you can type a control space and you can bring this whole thing up. So let's try control space one more time. So I would want to use a BigDecimal. So I'll say big and control space. You see there's a BigDecimal coming up, and now I can again press Ctrl Space after the whole thing came up. You can also see that the import happened automatically. So the Eclipse is automatically doing the import. So I would do a Ctrl Z, big, Ctrl Space, I'm pressing enter now, and you'd see that the import automatically happens. This is called auto suggestion. When I'm typing BigDecimal, now you can also see there's an error coming up. So what Eclipse is saying is, it's saying there's an error, insert semicolon to complete the block statement. Actually what we want to do is we want to create a new BigDecimal variable. So I can say BigDecimal num and press Ctrl Space again, and you can choose which constructor you would want to use. I would want to use BigDecimal with 0. If you leave the semicolon out, Eclipse is already showing you an error again. So semicolon. Okay, whatever we have looked at until now are kind of very basic things. Control Space is kind of, if you have worked with Eclipse for more than a day, I think Control Space becomes natural to you. So any place you want to type in and you want to expand further, I type in big and I want to know what options are there, I press Control Space. So Control Space is kind of the most basic editing options. The other most basic editing option is Control 1. So you can type in Control 1, Eclipse comes up with a list of options. So Control Space is auto suggestion. So Control Space is basically tell me what are the things that are present in Java which I can make use of. So, or tell me what are the things which are already existing in this project which I can make use of. That's Control Space. Control 1 is a little different. Control 1 or Command 1 is to suggest what are my actions from here. So it's saying either I can change to BigDecimal, or it can even go ahead and create a class big for you. So now I can say create class big. You'd see that Eclipse would come up with a different thing. Now it's saying class big, and now I can click OK. It would create the class big for me. We didn't really want to create the big class. We can go ahead and delete this. What I wanted actually to use is the BigDecimal class itself. So let's go ahead and change to that. So that's command 1. Let's type in new BigDecimal of 0. And now I'm pressing Ctrl 1 again. You'd see that there are a few suggestions coming up. It's saying either assign it to a local variable. I can do that. So now it's automatically creating a new variable for me. Now I can say BigDecimal number is equal to new BigDecimal. Or the other option I had was, as soon as I created this, it's saying assign statement to a new field. So what it does, it creates a field in the class. It's creating a private static BigDecimal and assigning it in here. Let's say main was not declared static. Let's say main was not a static thing, and now I'm doing this. What would happen? Assign to a new field, and now you'd see that this is not a static field. Because main was static, main is a static function, it tried to make this whole thing static because you cannot access instance variables in a static method. Let's go ahead and go back to where we were. What we are really looking at is the fact that Ctrl Space and Ctrl 1 are kind of the most basic editing features in Eclipse. So any place you have a question or you don't know what to do, you can press Ctrl 1, and Ctrl 1 can give you what are the options that you can do. So whenever there's a compilation error, press Ctrl 1 and it can come up with a list of options that you can use in there. Try practicing Ctrl 1 and Ctrl Space. Try practicing Ctrl 1 and Ctrl Space in different scenarios, and I would see you in the next step. In the last step, we looked at Ctrl Space and also Ctrl 1. These are two important commands when we are doing a lot of editing. In this step, we would focus a little bit on how to debug a Java program. We would move into editing again in one of the further steps, but for now, let's focus on how to debug. And for us to debug something, we need to have a program. So how do I create a Java program to debug? So what I want to create is I would want to loop around an array and write a program to sum the numbers in an array. What I would type in is fore. Fore is standing for each, and I press Ctrl Space bar. You'd see that there is an option for each coming up. I would say for each, and next it's showing me the syntax for each. I would type in now. I would want an integer, and the name I would want to call it as num, and numbers, actually num, I would call it number, and now I can press enter. So now there's an error because the numbers is not really declared. So I can press Ctrl 1 on top of it, and I'm saying create local variable numbers. So already numbers is created. Now I can say what type of it is. It's a int, right? So I would say int numbers, and then again I'm getting a compilation error because numbers is not initialized. I'm saying now initialize variable, and it's saying null, but I don't really want to give null, so I would go ahead and say 1 2 3 4, and so now I can add the number. So what I would want to do is I would want to do sum. I would want to add it up. Sum plus is equal to number. I just typed sum plus is equal to number, and now I'm pressing Ctrl 1 again. So I'm saying create local variable sum. It's creating in here directly. So that's not what I want. I would want to create a local variable a little up. So what I would do is I'll say create local variable sum, but I would actually try and break it up myself. So what I'll do is int sum, and sum is equal to number. And now I want to move this line. The way you can move a line up is by using the Alt and using the up arrow. So just press Alt up arrow and you would see that the line would move up. And now int sum is equal to number, actually I want to do sum plus is equal to number. So now that's fine, but there's a compilation error. Again I press Ctrl 1 and I'm saying initialize variable is equal to 0. That's very good. So you'd see that I'm just using Ctrl 1 in a lot of situations, and there are a lot of things that Eclipse is automatically doing for me. Now let's go ahead and do a sysout and print the value of sum. How do I run this program? It's simple, right? Right click, run as Java application 15. That's simple. But what I want to do is now I would want to use a debug mode. In a debug mode, what we would need to do is add some things called breakpoints. The way you add a breakpoint is just double click down here. So double click, use your mouse, do a double click, and now you can do a right click, debug as Java application. When I debug, what would happen is we would shift to a different perspective. Earlier we were talking about perspectives where we said when I'm doing different things, I would want to do different things. I would want to see different things on my screen. And this arrangement of different views is called a perspective. So we would switch now to a debug perspective. Yes. And you'd see that there are different views which are coming in here. Now you'd see here is which line I'm executing in. So there's a thread, and which is the line which it is in? It's in line 7. And also you'd see now that there are a few variables coming up. So on the here you can see what are the variables which are present. There's a variable called sum, there's a variable called array called numbers, there's a integer variable called sum, and there are arguments which are passed in which we are not making use of in here. Also you can click the breakpoints to see what are the breakpoints. So we have a breakpoint at line 7. You can disable and enable breakpoints as well in here. So you can disable it and enable it in here. And also we would look at a thing called conditional breakpoints a little later, but for now let's look at proceeding further with this particular debugging. So now we are inside this loop, we are able to see the values for each of the variables. Sum has a value of 0, that's the initialized value. And now I would want to go ahead further. The way you can look at the shortcuts for that is there are different features. So step into F5, step over F6. So usually we would use F5. When I say F5, it would, if it was a function call, it would go into the function as well. If I use F6, it would go over the function. Basically, it will do the function call and go to the next statement. So let's use F5 for now. So if you are in Mac, press function F5. If you are in Windows, press F5. That's it. Function F5. You'd see that that line is executed. Now a new variable comes into picture called number. It has a value 1. Now again press F5, function F5. So you'd see now that some value is incremented. So you can now loop around this particular statement step by step. And now we are inside the println function because I pressed F5 on println as well. But I don't really want to worry about what's inside the println statement. So I would click F8. Actually, if you go and see run, there would also be F8, which is to resume. So when I press F8, it would go ahead and continue executing the rest of the program. And it prints the output. So that's actually very simple illustration of how you can debug a Java program. There are a lot of advanced features that are present in debugging. So let's debug again. So right click, debug as Java application. We would want to learn about something called watch expressions. So let's say I want to create an expression. I would want to watch what the value of it is. Right click, you can right click on a variable or something and you can say inspect to see the value of it. So it would come up in here because it's not in the scope, it's not really live yet. What I'll do is I'll press F5 to bring it into scope, and now I can do right click on this and inspect. You can also see the shortcut in here. You can directly use that shortcut to bring it up, or I can do an inspect. Now you would see that number has a value 1. Instead of number, you can also bring up expressions in here. If there was some expression in here, you can inspect that as well. Or you can also right click and say I would want to watch this variable. So I'm saying right clicking that variable and saying watch, and you'd see that there is a new view coming in called expressions. In here you can actually add any kind of expressions using the variables which are there in there. So number into 3 I have added in, so you can see the value. So I can say number into sum. It would multiply the number with sum and show the value in here. So these expressions are useful to see different, not just the variables. So here we can see the variables, but here you can type in an expression involving these variables as well. The other thing you can do is also you can change the value. Instead of sum having a value 0, if you want to give it a value of 20, go ahead and give that. So now you would see that sum has a value of 20, and when I execute the next statement, function Fi, you'd see that sum is incremented and it becomes 21. So you can even edit the values. So just double click in here and you can change the value of the variables. The other important thing we would look at very soon, I'll just go ahead and click F8 and finish this debugging session. And Now, the next feature that I would want to really look at is conditional breakpoints. Right now, we are breaking at every execution of this particular loop. What I want to do is I would want to have a breakpoint here only when a certain situation occurs. So I would want to activate this breakpoint only on certain scenarios. So how do I do that? Is by using a conditional breakpoint. The way you can add a conditional breakpoint is by just highlighting that. I'm double clicking on breakpoints so that I can see it in maximized view. And now I'll say conditional, and I can put in the condition in here. So I would want to have this breakpoint only when, let's say, sum is greater than 5. So I'm saying sum is greater than 5, only then activate this breakpoint, and saving it, Ctrl S, save. And let's start another debug session. Now we have added in a conditional breakpoint. I'm doing a right click, debug as Java application. You'd see that I'm stopping in here. Let's see the values in the variable. You can see that sum has a value of 6. So already 1, 2, 3, all of them are executed, and now the code is stopping at sum 6. Now if you actually press F5, you'd see that the number which we are talking about is 4. So we are actually in the loop at this particular thing. This is a conditional breakpoint. Only when, like in the previous loops, Java would have seen that the sum at this point would have value 1, at this point 3, at this point 3 plus 3 is 6. So that's why at the end of this particular thing is when the conditional breakpoint comes into picture, and it's stopping in here. So this is the conditional breakpoint. Conditional breakpoint is very useful in loops when there are hundreds of executions happening and you would want to stop at a particular point. Then you can give which condition you want to stop on, and then you can also use the conditional breakpoint to do something of this kind. Now I'm going to do F8 to complete the execution. In this step, we learned how to debug a Java program. We learned how to see the values of the variables, how to use a breakpoint, how to use a conditional breakpoint, and we also learned how to use expressions. Welcome back. In this step, we would be looking at a lot of Eclipse shortcuts. My favorite Eclipse shortcut is Ctrl Shift L. Ctrl Shift L or Command Shift L will bring a list of all the shortcuts which are present in Eclipse. So once you press Ctrl Shift L, then you would see all the shortcuts which are there. I mean, this is a huge list of shortcuts. Actually about 150 shortcuts which are present in Eclipse. What we would do during this step is go over some of them. So next time you have a problem locating something of this kind, you can actually just say Ctrl Shift L and look through the whole thing and see if you are able to find something. In the last step, we realized the importance of Ctrl Space Bar and Ctrl 1. I think Ctrl Space Bar and Ctrl 1 would be kind of the default ones you'd be using most of the time. And the other important one that we just looked at is Ctrl Shift L. The next one that we would be looking into actually is Alt up arrow down arrow. So just press the Alt button or the Option button in Mac and press the up arrow or the down arrow. So just press up arrow, down arrow, and you'd see that the line moves up or down. So it works with a single line as well as multiple selection of lines. So you just select a few set of lines. So what I'm doing is Shift and pressing the down arrow so that I can select all the lines, and then I can press Alt up arrow and down arrow so that I can actually move the whole thing up and down. So you can move blocks, you can move any set of codes by using Alt up arrow and down arrow. Okay, that's good. Next is the most frequently used shortcut in Eclipse. What's that? Ctrl Shift R. Ctrl Shift R opens up any resource you would want to open up. So a resource, it's a Java file, a XML file, any text file, everything would come up now. So if I type in first Java class, aha, there you go. So you are now able to see the first Java class coming up. So it's Ctrl Shift R, and you can bring up any XML that's there, or any Java file, any text file, any kind of file that is there in your workspace. The other important thing about the open resource is the fact that you can bring something up just typing the first letter. So we have first Java class. So I type in FJC, all caps. That's most important thing. FJC, all caps, it brings up first Java class. So if there is a big class you don't want to type the entire name in, you can just type in the first letters of the first important letters. So F, J, C, and you can bring that particular thing up. So Ctrl Shift R is kind of the most used, actually Ctrl Shift R and Ctrl Shift T are kind of the most used shortcuts. So what's Ctrl Shift T? Ctrl Shift T brings up all the classes that are available. So when I talk about classes, it's not just the classes you are writing. So I'm working in first Java class, and in this project all that we have is probably a couple of classes, actually one class. But actually, because we have Java in the class path, or we are using JDK, you get a lot of stuff there. So when I say Ctrl Shift T, it would bring up all the list of classes that are present. So I'm typing an array list. It brings in the java.util.arraylist, which is already present in there. You can also type in first Java class to bring up our class as well. So it would be including classes in our project as well as in all the dependencies of our project. So what are projects that we are making use of? Let's say we are using log4j, or we are using Spring. All the classes would come up when I type in Ctrl Shift T, and even here the uppercase thing works. So if I type in AL, it's array list. This comes in without a problem. So null pointer exception. So now NPE. I just type in NPE. I can come up with null pointer exception, and I can choose them by using the up arrow, down arrow. So this is so easy to search for classes, to search for types in Eclipse. So the important commands are Ctrl Shift T and Ctrl Shift R. The next thing that we would be looking into is how do you comment lines. So I'm selecting this block, and how do I comment? So one of the ways of commenting the code is by pressing Ctrl and pressing the slash. So that's it. So the entire piece of code is commented. So it's Ctrl plus slash. So Ctrl slash would comment the entire piece of code which is in there. So that's how to comment a set of lines. So I want to comment all the group of lines. I press Ctrl slash, and that's it. And I press Ctrl slash again, they would be uncommented. So Ctrl slash, it works both ways, to comment and uncomment. For example, now if I go to this particular pieces of line and press Ctrl slash, they become uncommented and they give compilation errors because they're just shortcuts. So now I go ahead and do the same thing again. So this is the slash which we are typing in. So Ctrl slash. One of the important things that we would want to do while we are doing programming is to understand the hierarchy of classes. So if, let's say, I want to understand the hierarchy of array list, what I did was type in Ctrl Shift T, type array list, AL should be perfect, and pressed enter to bring this up. And now I can do a function F4 or F4, just F4 if you are in Windows, and function F4 if you are in Windows. So I'm just pressing function F4 or F4, and you'd see that the entire type hierarchy of array list comes up. So you can see that array list is inheriting from abstract list inherits from abstract collection, and abstract collection inherits from object. And you can also see what are the other things which are present in the array list type hierarchy. So this is what is called a type hierarchy. A type hierarchy shows the inheritance relationships that are present for a particular class. So I can do the same thing on abstract list as well. So it's function F4. Now for abstract list, the entire type hierarchy comes in. So abstract list, and what are all the things that are extending abstract list, and where does abstract list inherit from, all that kind of information you can bring up by using the type hierarchy, which is function F4. Actually, the other way you can bring up the type hierarchy is also by pressing Command T. So a Command T or a Ctrl T would bring up this particular way of looking at the type hierarchy. So in the earlier look where we pressed function F4, this was the look we got. So we can look at what the entire details as well. So I can actually look at this particular thing or this thing, or what are the methods in there. So the function F4 or the F4 is kind of a detailed thing. But if I want to quickly look up the hierarchy, a better command to go for would be Ctrl T or the Command T thing. So as soon as I press Command T, this thing comes up, and I can see where each one of them is coming from. So now array list, let's say I want to do a command T on or Ctrl T on. So now you can see the hierarchy of array list, and you can pick up a class that you are interested in to look at. So this is called a type hierarchy. Let's say I want to delete this line right now. The shortcut for that is Ctrl D or Command D. So just press Ctrl D or select a set of things and press Ctrl D. Actually, I don't need to select anything to do a Ctrl D. So let's say the cursor is anywhere, I just do Ctrl D, it would delete that particular line of code. Ctrl L, on the other hand, is to go to a specific line. So let's say I have an exception, I would want to go to that particular piece of exception. The way I can do that is by pressing Ctrl L, and I can type in the line number I want to go to, and then I would be in that particular thing. Ctrl L, I want to go to line number 20. Ctrl L, I want to go to line number 2. So that's basically Ctrl L. So we have until now looked at Ctrl T, type hierarchy, Ctrl slash, which is to comment and uncomment the lines, Ctrl D, which is to delete a line, Ctrl L, which is to go to a specific line. The next one is Ctrl Q, which would take you to the position of the last edit. Let's say I'm going in here, let's say I go to a specific class and do a sysout. So let's say I'm going here, line 30, and I'm adding another sysout in here, system, or you can just type in sysout actually. Let's use this and just say empty. And now I'm at some other place, line 7, I want to find out what was the last line I want to change. The way I can go to is Ctrl Q, and it would directly take me to the last line that I have edited. So even if I have transversed through multiple methods, it would actually take me back to the last edit which is there. So that's Ctrl Q. Ctrl Q takes you to the last edit. The unique thing about Ctrl Q is even in Mac, it's Ctrl Q. It's not Command Q in Mac. If you press Command Q in Mac, it would close the entire thing and the Eclipse would be closed down. So be careful in avoiding that. In Eclipse, it's Ctrl Q, and in Mac it's Ctrl Q, and the same in Windows, Ctrl Q as well. Let's open up the ArrayList class again. Let's say I'm in the ArrayList class. This is, as you know, this would be quite a weak class, 1400 lines of code. And I would want to get a quick overview of this particular thing. So the way I can get that is by using Command O or Control O. So just press Control O, you'd get the outline of the current class. Control T gives us the type hierarchy of the current class, and Control O gives us the outline of the current class. What are the elements which are present? What are the methods that are present? Which of them are private? You can directly make out from here. You can see that they are private methods, they are public methods, and all that kind of stuff. That's Command O or Control O. So Control O gives you an outline of the current class. Let's say I'm in here in the ArrayList class, and I would want to see what the code for abstract list looks like. The way you can do that is by just saying F3 or function F3. So that's very simple. So all that you need to do is press F3, function F3 or F3. So you would now see that the class, the code for that particular file would come up. Are a couple of interesting features in Eclipse which we will be discussing right now, which is the first one is breadcrumb. So when I toggle breadcrumb, it shows how you came into this particular class. So ArrayList, how did we get to it? Actually, it's because we have the JDK in our path. So it's in Java util ArrayList. If I go back to first Java class, Eclipse in 28 minutes source a package, the name of the class, and I'm in the interface dummy. So if you actually keep traversing, it would also change based on, so now I'm in dummy class. So this breadcrumb can be useful, especially when you are new to a certain project. So toggle breadcrumb, that's a really good useful feature. And the other useful feature in here is toggle occurrences. So mark occurrences, you can see in here, it's basically if I highlight a variable. So if I'm highlighting sum, it shows where all it's used. If it's disabled, then you would not see this feature happening. So when I enable the mark occurrences, what would happen is when I select something, it would show where all that particular variable is used. I highlight numbers, it shows where it's used. Number, where is it used? Sum, where is it used? So it can highlight where that specific variable is used. In this step, we looked at some of the important shortcuts in Eclipse. Actually, there might be a lot of shortcuts that we have missed, but what we tried to cover in here is the prominent ones that I make use of most of the time. In this step, let's focus on the refactoring features which are present in Eclipse. The normal way to get to the refactoring features is just by pressing right click, refactor. And you'd see that there are a lot of options which are present in here. There are a lot of options which are present in the refactor, and we would be exploring some of them during this particular step. So let's say I want to extract this to a different method. How do I do that? I would do that by making using a command Alt Shift M. In Mac, it's Command Alt M or Command Option M. So let's use Windows nomenclature from now on. It would be Alt Shift M. So Alt Shift M, what you'd see is in this particular piece of code, we are actually sending in two inputs, two parameters, numbers and also sum. And the calculated sum, as you can see, it's returning as an input. If I go ahead and do that, it would be calculate sum, and I do enter. Okay, there we go. We have a calculated sum. The bad thing about this particular method is the fact that initialization is happening here, and thereby I have to send sum as an parameter. I don't like this. I want to inline this back. So whatever extract I have done, I want to inline it back. It's Alt Shift I, which is inline, and it would inline every invocation of this method. You'd see that the code for this particular method would be replaced back. That's it. So Alt Shift M is to extract a method. Alt Shift M is to Alt Shift M is to extract a method, and Alt Shift I is to inline the method. And also, actually right now it's creating two variables. I don't really want the sum variable at all. So what I can say is I can say inline. So it's assigned more than one, so it cannot be inline. That's very good. So what I'll do is I'll do a Ctrl D, remove that particular piece of line. Now I can very quickly edit it back to sum. So that's good. But what we want to really do is extract the entire thing out. So if I now extract the whole thing out, you'd see that the only thing which is passed in is numbers. So now I can say calculate sum. This is a good method because all that is accepting is numbers as input, and it returns the sum back as output. And I'm really happy with this method, so I would leave it as it is. Let's say I don't want to really want to call it sum, but I would want to call it something else. The way you can rename a variable is by pressing Alt Shift R. Now I can rename it to anything. Instead of calling it sum, some people like to call it result because that's the result of the method, and then I can press enter, and you'd see that all the places where that particular thing is used, the name has changed. Actually, this is not just for variables. Let's say I want to change the name of this particular method, calculate sum. So I would want to change the name of this particular method. I don't want to call this calculate sum, but I would want to call this calculate sum for n numbers. Or I'm just typing something in. So Alt Shift R. I want to change the name of this interface, dummy interface. I want to change the name of this particular class. You'd see that even the name of this Java file would be changed. So first Java class, I'm typing in first Java class refactored. I'll say continue, and you'd see that even the name of the Java file is renamed. So that's Alt Shift R. So until now we have looked at Alt Shift R, which is to rename, Alt Shift M, which is to extract a method, Alt Shift I, which is to extract, which is to inline a particular method. Consider this small piece of code which is present in here. So you have int radius is equal to 5, and I have area is 3.14 into radius into radius. It's quite a simple thing. What I want to do is, instead of directly putting in here, I want to extract a variable out of it. The way you can do that is pressing Alt Shift L. When you say Alt Shift L, you can extract a local variable. I can give it a name. This is area. So I can say area, double area is equal to 3.14 into radius into radius. And if I don't really want to do that, I can again do an Alt Shift I. This is the same as inlining a method, inlining a variable, it's the same. So Alt Shift I, and I would inline it back. And now I can extract it back again by using Alt Shift L, area. Now, one thing I don't really like in here is 3.14 is a constant. So it's the value of pi. So how do I tell the program that it's a value of pi? I can create a constant, Alt Shift C. Actually, there is nothing called Alt Shift C. I have to do Alt Shift T. That's the shortcut to bring up the refactor method. So Alt Shift T. So if you don't remember, method signature is C, extract method is M, extract local variable is L. All that you need to remember for a start is Alt Shift T, and this menu comes up. And now I can pick up extract constant. So extract constant pi. So it creates a variable pi. I mean, not a variable, it creates a constant pi which is assigned a value. That's how you can actually extract a constant out. Alt Shift C is used to change the parameters of a method. So let's say I don't want to really call these numbers, or I want to add a parameter to this method. So let's say I want to add new parameter int, and I would want to call it dummy, and I will give it a default value 0. And you'd see that everywhere this particular method is used, a 0 would be automatically passed as the default value. So now you can see that int dummy, a new parameter comes in, and also wherever this particular method is called, here it's adding in. So this is basically Alt Shift C. Alt Shift C is to change the signature of a method. Now I can go ahead and delete this one as well. So now I can say remove this particular thing and say OK, and then you'd see that that particular parameter is gone. If that parameter was gone, I mean used here, it would result in a few compilation errors, but what we wanted to do is remove the parameter completely. Another important thing that you can do is move methods as well. Alt Shift V would be the shortcut for that. So Alt Shift V, it would ask where do you want to move this particular method. So you can select a type to which you can move this particular method. Here I don't have a lot of things, but when you are actually working on refactoring something and you would want to move a method from one class to another class, that's it. So that's all you need to be able to do a refactor, Alt Shift M. That's a quick introduction to how you can refactor in Eclipse. There are a lot of other options in Eclipse that would help you to move things around classes as well. In the next step, let's move on to the code generation features which are present in Eclipse. In this step, let's look at some of the code generation features which are present in Eclipse. Eclipse is really wonderful in terms of code generation. So I'll just create a dummy class. I mean, I'm creating an inner class, but this could have been a class on its own. So let's say I'm creating a class bean, and I'm creating a private variable 1 int variable 2. I've just created a couple of simple private variables. Now I would want to generate the getters and setters for that. So all that you need to do is Alt Shift S and say generate getters and setters. Alt Shift S, generate getters and setters, and I can do even select all and press OK. You'd see that the getters and setters are automatically generated. You can do this for any kind of variable. So all that you need to do is select these things you would want to generate the thing for, Alt Shift S, and say generate getters and setters. Okay, these two, we already have the getters and setters, so we got the error. But if the getters and setters are not there, you'd get it. So it's select the thing and press Alt Shift S, and you can choose from the drop down what you want to generate. So now I would want to generate, let's say, the toString for this particular class. So I can say toString and generate the toString for that particular class as well. So you can see that the toString is created. Actually, one of the options which would have been present in that particular window would have been where this toString has to be generated and how this has to be generated. There are multiple options which are available, and the one which I chose first time was to use a simple string concatenation. Let's now do it again. Alt Shift S, generate toString, and let's now choose a code style different from it. So let's say we'll ask it to use string builder and say OK. So now it uses string builder to build the toString. So it also gives us the option where we can choose what are the things that we would want to be part of the toString. So you can choose the different things, and you can even actually have methods and inherited methods as part of that particular toString thing. So that's how you can generate a toString. And now if I want to generate the equals and hash code, that's there too. So you can go ahead and select what are the things you would want to be present as part of the equals and hash code. I mean, as you would already know, whenever you override an equals, you have to also override the hash code method if you want to really write good programs. So when you select these two, Eclipse would automatically generate the equals and hash code method. So generally the equals and hash code methods would be little huge because they have to take care of all the situations where both objects can be null. So all that kind of stuff would be handled automatically, and the equals and hash code methods would be generated to you. The next thing that we would be looking at is actually generating a constructor using fields. So Alt Shift S, again, Alt Shift S, generate constructor using fields. Now you can generate a constructor. So you have a constructor generated here, which is very clear, right? I mean, all this kind of code I can write it manually, but why do I want to write it manually when Eclipse can generate this for me? So Alt Shift S, and you can also say which methods you would want to override from the superclass. So let's say I want to override finalize and clone. So you can go ahead and choose them and implement those particular, get the default implementation. So now I can go ahead and stub whatever I would want to do in here. So I'll remove them. This class is really giving huge. That's Alt Shift S and choose override implement methods. So you can choose which methods from the superclass you would want to override and get a default template where you can fill in exactly what you want to do. So these are some of the really important things that are present in Eclipse. These are the different code generation features that are present in Eclipse. In the next step, let's see how we can use we can organize the imports, how we can format source code, how we can use save actions. How we can format source code, how we can use save actions. In this step, we would learn a little bit more about how you format your source code, and also a very important feature in Eclipse, save actions. It's actually one of my favorite features in Eclipse, save actions. You look at this piece of code, it's not really formatted really well. So I want to format this particular thing. The shortcut is Ctrl Shift F. So when you do Ctrl Shift F, the entire piece of code gets formatted. So Ctrl Shift F is the shortcut to format anything. So if I press Ctrl Shift F on the entire class, it would format the code for the entire thing. But I'm a lazy guy. I don't want to really keep doing this Ctrl Shift F all the time, because there are a lot of things that I would need to keep formatting, right? Let's say I just type in something. Let's say I was typing in another variable now, private int var3. I did save, and now again I have to do a Ctrl Shift F. I need to keep doing Ctrl Shift F 100 times. What's the fun in that? Let's see how we can use Eclipse to auto format the whole thing. Before that, actually, there are a lot of formatting settings which are there in Eclipse, which you'd be interested in checking them out. If you go to Eclipse Preferences or Windows Preferences in Eclipse, you can say how you want to format. So type in format, and you see Java Code Style Formatter in here. I select that, and now you can configure how your formatting should look like. So by default, we are using an Eclipse built-in style. Typically what we do in projects is we have a style of our own. What we would do is we would create a style of our own. We would actually go ahead and say edit and create a new one. So now I would go ahead and change. I would change how the whole thing should be formatted. For example, let's take braces. That's clear. So whether I want the braces in same line or next line. Typically in Java we would use the same line, so I'll leave it in here. So everything you can configure in here. Some people prefer white spaces after declarations. After each declaration you have a lot of white space, and even after things like if, else. So you want a white space here, you want a white space here. Do you want a white space after else? You can configure everything in here. How do you want the white spaces in for? How many blank lines do you want to retain? How many new lines you want to have? So you can control almost everything in the formattings from these settings. And now I can actually rename. So I can create a profile name in 28 minutes, and I can say apply, OK. And now I have in 28 minutes. If I really want, I can even export these settings out. So I can say export all, and I can give it a name, and I can give it to friends who can use the import feature to import these formatting settings. Thereby, everybody in the project would be using the same formatting settings. That's how you configure the formatting settings. But what I wanted to do was, I want these formatting settings to be invoked every time I save. So every time I save, right now what I have to do is I have to go manually and do a Ctrl Shift F. I don't really like that. So how do I avoid that? Again, Eclipse preferences or Windows preferences in Eclipse, you can go ahead and say type in save. There is a great feature called save actions. What is the thing about save? The thing about save actions is the fact that whenever I check this in, so I'm saying perform these actions on save. For now, I would do two things. Formatting source code, I'm saying format all lines. You can also choose to only format the lines which you have edited. That's a useful feature because if in a project you are editing 3 lines, you don't want to format the entire file. You might probably only want to format the lines which you have edited. So you can use that feature as well. So format all lines and say OK. So I'm now configuring save actions. You'd see now that whenever, let's say I'm doing a save now, the whole thing gets automatically formatted. So that's the important thing about save actions. What we have configured in save actions for now is just a couple of things, right? We have configured formatting source code and organizing imports. But actually, you can configure a lot of additional options as well. You can go in configure and you can say how you want to organize your code, how you would want to sort your members. So would you want to be able to sort them? You can also kind of look at code style. For example, if you're using a normal for loop, do you want to actually convert it into an enhanced for loop? And do you want to really use a block for every if statement? So for example, this else does not have a block. Once I say this, you would have a block around it. So these kind of things. So if you have coding standards like that, you can automatically enable them in here so that you don't really need to worry about them. And using parentheses in in expressions. So you can say always, then it would always use parentheses around anything and every expression. And also using final. Some of the people really prefer to add final onto arguments, final onto everything that's there. So if you are one of them, you can use this as well. And also member accesses. Whenever I'm accessing this particular value, would I need to just say value or would I like to call it this dot value? You can say this. So all this kind of stuff you can handle. And also missing code. So let's say you are overriding something. Should we add missing annotations like override, deprecated, and things like that? And the last thing is unnecessary code. Let's say I have an unused import in the thing. Should I want to automatically clear it out? So then I can use check unused imports, check unused private parameters. What it does is if you don't use any private parameters, it would automatically remove them. Same is the case with all local variables. So there are a lot of options which are there in save actions. I'm configuring some of them just so that I can demo them to you. In this particular method, dummy, what I'll do is I'll create an unused variable, int I. You'd see that it disappears because it's an unused variable. And same is the case with unused imports. Let's quickly try that. So I'll say array list, new member. I'm importing the array list. And now the array list is needed. But what I'll do is I'll delete this line. And you'd see that I'm not really deleting line number 3. It's an unused import right now. I'm saving it. You'd see that it's gone. So Eclipse automatically takes care of all these kind of things. That's the beauty and the benefits of save actions. We will move on to more Eclipse features like views, perspectives, Eclipse plugins in the next few steps. In this step, let's look at an important feature in Eclipse called views. Whenever I'm doing something, you'd see that there are a lot of windows which are open in Eclipse. So if you look at the whole thing, there are views in here: type hierarchy, package explorer, outline, each of the classes, problems, javadoc, declaration, console. These are all the different views which are present in Eclipse. If you want to really want to see all the views which are present in Eclipse, you can go to Window, Show View, and you can select any of them. You can see the shortcut to bring this up directly in here. So you can use that shortcut to bring up the views directly. So there are a lot of views which are present in Eclipse. So what we'll do is we'll go to other and take quick look at a huge lot of them. So you can see that Eclipse has so many sets of views. So each one of them would have 3 or 4 extra ones. So let's start with a call hierarchy view. The shortcut for call hierarchy is in here. Open call hierarchy. This is the shortcut. I mean, if you're using Windows, you might see a different shortcut. You can use the shortcut which is present in here. So now if I open up the call hierarchy, it would show all the places where this particular method is called. So it is actually now searching the entire Java libraries to see where all this particular method is used. So where all the ArrayList method is specifically used. A call hierarchy shows what are all the different methods which are calling this and what are the different things which are done inside that. And you can actually look at the entire hierarchy of the call in here. So that's the call hierarchy view. I mean, there are a lot of other views. I mean, I think it would be impossible for us to go through all the views in here, but we already looked at some of the important views. We looked at type hierarchy. That was one of the views. The way we can bring up is F4, function F4. So just press function F4 and you'd bring the type hierarchy in. The other view is package explorer. So package explorer shows all the different files which are present in here. This is also a very good view to look at all the things which are present in here. There are two different ways you can see in the package explorer. So you can either have it flat where it's shown in this way, where I can actually go in and see that particular classes in. So if you look at java.util, this is how it comes up when it's flat. When it's not flat, when it's hierarchical, you can see how it comes up. Hierarchical, you'd see that nav util and under util what is there and all that kind of stuff. It kind of becomes a hierarchical view. And the other important concept in Eclipse is the fact that you can organize your projects into working sets. So I can say working sets at the base, and what I can do in Eclipse is let's create quickly a few projects. So I'll just call it Java project, project 1. I can say add this to a working set and create a new working set. I'll give it a name, first working set. So now you can see that project 1 is in the first working set. I can move the projects around between working sets, and working sets is a good way to group your projects. Let's say I'm working on 5 or 6 projects at the same time, then probably I would want to use a specific working set. So I can open that up and close it up, and also you can create other working sets and group the projects. So working sets is a good way where you can group projects in an easy way. So in the package explorer, you can also set top elements as either projects, so then the top elements becomes projects, or you can set it as working sets, then it becomes that particular working set alone. And also the important thing about working set is the fact that you can also say which working sets you want to work on right now. So let's say I don't want to work on other projects, I only want to work on the first working set. So it will only show first working set in here. I mean, this is basically to be able to, if let's say if I'm working on a lot of projects, I can group them and keep working on a specific set of projects rather than have all of them in my view. There are a lot of views in Eclipse, so going through each one of them would be very tough. But the important thing is you can organize them in any way. You can drag any view and put it anywhere you would want to. So let's say I don't want it here, I want it here. Just keep dragging, I mean, just play around with it. Whenever you have a problem, you can do something called window reset perspective. It would go back to the earlier default settings, but I can actually play around with it. I can organize this stuff the way I would want to, wherever I would want them to come up. So if I don't want the console to come up here, I can drag it out, or I can even close it, or I can add a view in here. There are a lot of things that are possible with the views. I mean, the only way you can actually learn everything about Eclipse is trying to really play around with it. I would really recommend you to do that. So that's about the different views which are present in Eclipse. In the next step, we would move on to perspective. In this step, let's learn about perspectives. We learned that each of this window is a view. So each of these things in here is a view, and how all the views in a specific window set is organized is what is called a perspective. Let's go to a perspective which is called Java perspective. Window, open perspective, and I can type in other and say Java. We are already in Java perspective, so nothing really happened. So in a Java perspective, this is how things look like. We played around a lot with the Java perspective. So let's do a reset perspective so that it goes back to its defaults. Yes, please. Now you'd see the default Java perspective. I mean, this is kind of the perspective where you can actually look at different things. Let's say I'm working on a class, I can get an outline of it, and I can manage my tasks in here. I can use Project Explorer to do different things, and I can look at the compilation errors and also look at the declarations and the Java docs as well. When I want to keep writing the Java code, I just do Ctrl M and I keep writing the code, and whenever I want to focus on the outline or something, I can come. So this is a very good perspective where we can actually develop Java code. Let's say I'm not developing Java code, but I'm debugging Java code. In that kind of situation, we go to something called a debug perspective. In the debug perspective, you'd see that everything changes. Now, the views which you would see would be what are related to the debug. So what do I want to know when I'm debugging? What are the variables in scope? What are the breakpoints? What are the expressions that I added in? What are the watch expressions I have added in? And also, what is the call hierarchy? And also, what are the different kinds of threads that are open? And what are the servers which are running? So you'd see that the entire set of views that you would be seeing are completely different. Let's say I want to understand a project, what I would need to do. So then I would go into something called a Java browsing perspective. Here I can easily look at all the things. So for a particular class, let's say I'm opening up the array list class, you can see what are the different packages, what are the different types which are related to them, so that I can easily browse to them. So this is a very good, I can directly browse to that particular method. And this is a very good perspective where you would want to learn about a project. So when I want to start learning about a project, I want to read a lot of code, this perspective would be the best perspective. So based on what you are doing, there are a lot of perspectives which are present in Java. So you can see also, let's say I'm committing some code to Git, then I can use the Git perspective. And I'm looking at a lot of resources, how the entire project structure is organized, then I can probably go into the resource perspective. So there are a lot of perspectives which are present in here. You can play around with them and you can learn a lot more about these perspectives. So perspective is basically the way different views are organized. What you would want to do, I mean, depending on what you want to do, the views you would need would be different. So the way these views are organized are called perspectives. Actually, you can even save whatever perspective you are in. So let's say you worked hard, you organized your views, I want this here, I want something else somewhere, and you have done that all, and you would want to save this perspective. You can say Windows save perspective as and give it a name, and that you can go to that perspective whenever you would want to. So that's all you'd need to know about perspectives. In the next step, let's move on to things which are called Eclipse plugins. One of the prominent reasons why Eclipse has become so famous is because of its architecture. Eclipse is very extensible. Eclipse has a base framework and you can really extend it a lot with a lot of plugins, and that's what made Eclipse very famous. If you really want to look at what are the plugins that are used in the current build that you are using, all that you need to do is Eclipse, about Eclipse. Probably in Windows it would be in help about Eclipse. So just go in there, about Eclipse, from help about Eclipse, and click the installation details and just go into the, by default it would be in the installed software tabs. Just go into the plugin tabs and you would see a whole list of plugins that you're using right now. And if you type in Maven, actually this is the Maven integration for Eclipse. We'll look at a Maven a little bit later, where we would try and import Maven projects using Eclipse, and we would also want to import a few things from Git as well. So we have a Git plugin also installed in here. These are actually the default plugins which came in with Eclipse. I didn't install them anywhere, but the way Eclipse is built is there's a base framework and there are a lot of plugins added on. So there are a lot of plugins in here. Some of the times these plugins can cause a problem because you have too many plugins and the performance of Eclipse is not really good. And whenever you have a problem with performance of Eclipse, then probably one of your plugins is the root cause. So it's not really good to have a lot of plugins installed, but you should actually make the choice of what plugins you want and what you don't want. In this specific video, we'll also look at installing one of the plugins. So one of the plugins I really like, when I'm coding, I would want to really focus on code quality, the coding standards, whether I'm adhering to all this stuff which I need to adhere to. And one of the plugins which really helps in that is the check style plugin. What I've done is I've searched for check style plugin. The first result which would come in is Eclipse check style plugin. I went in there and this is the page which comes up. And now I would want to install this plugin in my Eclipse. So all that I need to do is drag this and put it in here. Eclipse is bringing up the marketplace, and now I can go ahead and download the plugin. So this is one way I can do that. I mean, by actually dragging and dropping. The conventional way of doing that would have been, instead of using this install, actually the conventional way is this. Take this URL from the update site. So take this URL from here and go to help install new software, and I would type this in and say add. I would say okay, and now Eclipse would talk to that site, check the plugins which are installed at that particular site, and would soon show us the check style plugin. There you go. I see the check style plugin. I'll select the check style plugin, click next. You'd see that sometimes you'd need to restart the Eclipse when there's a new software installed, a new plugin installed. The great thing about check style is that it checks for all the rules as I am coding them. So whenever there's a coding violation or something, it would point them out. And there are a lot of other plugins which are present, like PMD, Sonar, Find Bugs, which really help with the coding standards part of it. And also there are a lot of other plugins which are used in Eclipse, like the Maven plugin, the Git plugin. And these plugins help you to be really productive with Maven and Git as well. What we'll do in one of the next steps is look at how Maven would help us, the Maven plugin would help us, and also how we can import a Git project using the Git plugin. This actually took a little while, and now the next screen comes up. I can accept the license agreement and click finish. So now the software would be installed. If I would want, I can run it in background, but this is the primary thing that we are doing, so I'll let it run it. I'm asked to restart, so let's go ahead and restart. It asks for the workspace, and I use the same workspace as earlier. Eclipse finally launches up, and typically the preferences for the Eclipse plugins are in preferences. Eclipse preferences, let's go ahead and check for check style. So check style is what we are looking at. Check style has a set of rules which it enables. These are Google things, and you also have a couple of check style, other check style configurations. One is from Sun standards. I'll go out of that window, and I would want to enable check style for this particular project. So I would do a right click, go further down in the menu. There is something called check style. So bring up activate check style. So now check style would be activated for our project. You'd see now that there are a lot of errors that are being highlighted. Actually, for this small project that we wrote, we have about 161 warnings. So let's just take one of them. There is some, I think this is complaining about a tab character being in here, and also the indentation level. It has an indentation level of 8 instead of having 4, and all that kind of stuff. So you can look at the rules in check style. All that we wanted to show in this video was to show the power of Eclipse and the plugins which are there. Now, whenever you write some code, you can check for all the standards. You can even configure what standards you would want to look for and things like that with check style. There are a lot of other plugins that you would want to look up. The ones I would really recommend would be Infinite Test, which is really useful when we are writing a lot of JUnit tests. We keep running the tests again and again. In that kind of a context, Infinite Test would run, it has logic inbuilt to identify which are the important tests to keep running, and it would make sure that you can keep writing code and not really focused on running the test. If there's a test failure, Infinite Test would alert you. The other check style plugins I would recommend are related to code quality. I would recommend PMD, check style, as we discussed now, Find Bugs, and also there are plugins which have really good integration with Sonar. So if you have a Sonar server somewhere, you can get the results and see them in Eclipse. And the other important plugins I typically make use of are Hudson related ones or Jenkins related ones, where if there is a build failure, it would show an alert in my Eclipse directly. So those are typically the kind of plugins I would be using in my workspace. In the next video, let's move on to Maven and Git. In this step, we would want to learn about Maven and Git plugins. Actually, what we'll try and do is a very simple thing. We have a Git repository in 28 minutes Spring MVC step by step. So this Git repository has a Maven project. So we have a combination here. So this Git repository has a Maven project. What I would want to be able to do is I would want to take this Git repository code and I would want to have it in my local. So I would want to be able to take this and run it as a Maven project in my local. So what we'll do is we'll do it in 2 steps. So we would do this in 2 steps. First one is importing the project from Git and pulling it down. What we would do is we would pull it down as a normal project to our hard disk. So the code from Git would now be on our hard disk. The next thing what we want to do is to take the project from my hard disk and import it as a Maven project. So those are the 2 steps we would be doing. So this is 1, this is 2. So let's get started and let's see how easy it is to do these 2 things. First, I would want to import it as a Git project. So what I would need to do is file, import. I would type in Git. So I would say projects from Git. Next, I'll say clone URI. We want to clone a Maven project and the URL is this. So the URL to the Maven project is Spring MVC step by step. You can copy it from here. step-by-step.git. So I'll paste that in here and now I can say next. I would want to import the master, that's the branch name, next, and I would want to import it as a general project. So I'll say next, and we are importing it into a local repository, users Rangarao Karnam, Git and Spring MVN step by step, and say finish. Now I see the project which is imported, Spring MVC step by step. This is imported as a normal project. So what I'll do is I'll go to right click, properties, or you can do a Ctrl I, and I would want to copy the folder path to this. So I'll copy this so that I have it useful when I need it. So I do a copy, and what we'll do now is actually now this project is present in here as a normal project, but I would want to use it as a Maven project. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and right click, delete, okay, and do a file, import. We have downloaded the Git project to our hard disk. Now we would import the same thing from the hard disk as a Maven project. So what I would do is I would say existing Maven project because we have it on the local hard drive, and now I can import that in. You'd see that in a little while you would have the Maven project set up and running in Eclipse. If you look at this particular Maven project, you'd see that actually there is no configuration about Eclipse. So there is no Eclipse configuration which is present in here. It's just a simple normal Maven project, and even that project we are able to easily bring it down, and we are now having a Maven project in here. And you can do a lot of Maven commands on it. For example, you want to do, let's say, run as Maven install. Let's say you want to do a MVN install. You can do all that kind of stuff from Eclipse itself, because this is because of the M2E plugin. So we have the Maven to Eclipse plugin. So that's the plugin which is enabling all these features. Now you can see that the build is successful, and the project which we have created, Maven project, has the facility to be able to run on Tomcat also, just in a very easy way. So I just need to say Tomcat 7:run, as simple as that. Now you'd see that the Tomcat server is coming up at a particular URL. Now you have an application which is coming up. There is a small web application which is running down there as well. We saw a couple of things regarding Maven and Git. One is we pull down a Git project as to our hard disk. That's what we did with the Git plugin. And the second thing is we use Maven plugin to import the project as a Maven project. And second thing is we use the Maven plugin to do a MVN install. And also we were able to run the web application on Tomcat using the Maven plugin. So there are a lot of features that are present with Maven, and features which are present because of M2 Eclipse plugin, which gives us a lot of flexibility when we are using Maven with Eclipse. However, as far as Maven is concerned, I really like running commands from the command line. So those are some of the important things you would need to know about Maven and Git with respect to Eclipse. Congratulations! You have learned about Eclipse in this particular course. You have learned a lot of features of Eclipse and also a lot of tips on how do you become more productive with Eclipse. We really hope all the tips you have learned are really useful in your day-to-day life. Only way you can improve further with Eclipse is by practicing further. Practice the shortcuts further. Use the best practices. Eclipse is such a vast thing, it's very difficult to cover in one short course. But we tried to cover most of the major parts that are important from the developer's perspective. We really had fun creating this course, and I hope you had some fun too. Good luck and bye from the team here at In 28 Minutes. Do not forget to leave us a review. Bye bye.